So first off, obviously we're in a way different situation than when I scheduled these conversations. Nancy, I went ahead and muted you just because there's some background noise, but if you want to talk, you can unmute yourself. So I just wanted to ask you guys really quick, and you can either unmute or type in the chat box, just what your situation is right now. Are your libraries closed? Are you getting paid, I hope, to work from home, or are you attending this webinar because you're just that awesome? So go ahead and either unmute or let us know in the chat box what's going on. Nancy says they're closed. Luna just joined us. Administrative leave. Okay. Yep, that's a popular one. Part of the reason, guys, I decided to go ahead with all these webinars is I had heard from some library staff that they were getting paid from home as long as they had professional development opportunities that they were working on. So that is why we're here, and we're going to continue to be here, even if it's small numbers, because we want to help people have that opportunity if it's possible. Let me make sure. All right, Luna, welcome. You should be able to talk now too. If at any time you want to chime in and unmute yourself, that's absolutely fine. So we'll go ahead and get started. Maybe others will join us. If not, that's totally fine. So what I want to do first is just tell you guys a little bit about our community dialogue framework. And then once I've done that, we can talk about ways that either one, you can utilize this really cool framework while your library is closed, or two, resources that you have to plan for one once we're all back in action. Yeah, again, this is kind of a weird time because we really don't know what's going on, but you know, we're just trying to put these things out here for people. So I'm Annie Holland. I am the Community Engagement and Exhibits Manager at the Space Science Institute. I'm also a co-principal investigator on the NASA at My Library program and the STAR Library Education Network. So that's why most of you probably know me. Also, we have, with way cooler background than me.
Oh yeah, well that's because I'm blocking out my house.
Yes.
So hey guys, my name is Stephanie Vero Fields. I am the relationship manager. I work under Annie at the Space Science Institute, helping out with like the NAML project, so the NASA My Library project, and some other things that we have going on. I can also be the person that if you guys have any questions or anything you guys need help with, I'll drop my email in the chat box, and you guys are more than welcome to shoot me an email with questions for things that I can help you out with, whether it's resources or getting in contact with somebody. Like, that's what I'm here for.
Right. And you'll notice there's a couple other names on this slide, but they're not in the room. So we have had some of our colleagues, Greg and Jennifer, on the line, but Greg's cat is sick, so he is trying to find an emergency vet. So Stephanie, if you could try to grab, you know, links and stuff in the place we would normally insert them, that would be great. And Jennifer is our admin assistant, and she is working from home with just a hotspot with very little gigs to it. So she's trying to stay off the phone as much as possible. But I'm pretty sure Stephanie and I can handle it, maybe.
Yes.
I am jealous of Stephanie's background. My computer, even though it's brand new, is not updated enough for Zoom to let it have a background. So I'm gonna have to like put a tarp of some cool like Star Wars scene behind me or something, because I'm very jealous of everyone else. So our agenda today, and please guys do interrupt if you have questions. This is too small of a group for me to just talk at you as much as I love doing it. So we've already done the welcome and introductions, check one. I want to talk a little bit about the Our Planet Earth campaign and our updates, since obviously some of our plans have changed. What a community dialogue is, what the requirements are for you all. And I say requirements with all the air quotes in the world, because even without the coronavirus situation, they are still very loose requirements that were kind of at your discretion, so no worries there. And then I'd like to take an opportunity to do some Q&A and answer any questions, or just talk about how we can all support each other moving forward. Stephanie, could you make sure, because Jennifer was normally doing this, just to write down who all shows up today so that we can add it to our chart, so I know who to send follow-up emails to? That would be great.
Yeah.
Danke. So our planet Earth. So obviously you've all signed up for the Our Planet Earth campaign and probably received the email that it is suspended. What that means is not that we're not still sending you guys all the cool stuff we promised or providing resources. We're just putting our efforts towards stuff that is easier for you to send out to patrons for them to do at home. So we'll still be promoting citizen science activities, still be promoting things like, you know, staying healthy and safe, hiking around your neighborhood and all that. We're just doing it less around this Planet Earth campaign and more about just, we know we're all stuck at home right now. So what can we do to make it fun, educational, and again, for the library staff who need to be working to get paid, to give them some of that work to do. So you will have seen, if you open the newsletter, we did include a survey in that newsletter asking folks what they're doing right now and what supports we can provide. The most important thing for you guys to fill out on that survey, one, make sure your name and email's there so we can find you. But the NASA Solar System Ambassadors and Night Sky Network are planning on doing, just for libraries, because they love us so much, a bunch of online programming that you can do just for your patrons, right? So you'd like put up a Zoom on Facebook or email, however you get a hold of your patrons, and have a real NASA scientist or a NASA volunteer run programs for them that literally you just have to open. So I would really encourage you, if you haven't already filled that out on the survey, to go and do so. Stephanie will actually be playing matchmaker between the library staff and our NASA volunteers to get these things going. Our staff is also volunteering to do programs for individual libraries, or I have a program tomorrow for Girl Scouts, really for whoever asks, teachers as well. So please do take advantage of these resources. Our jobs have very much changed to focus on this right now. So we have the time, and please don't feel like you're being a burden if you ask for extra help, because we can provide it. Button's not working. So what the heck is a community dialogue? So I guess before I start talking, if anyone has done one of these before or is familiar with the concept, go ahead and let us know in the chat box. While you guys are doing that, so these community dialogues are informal conversations with community stakeholders, leaders, or members. When we first came up with this idea, it was actually part of our Discover Health, Descubre la Salud project. And our intent, really, my intent was I was going to these small, rural, predominantly Spanish-speaking libraries in Colorado and asking what their big health concerns were and big health issues so that I could make sure that those were represented in our library exhibit, right? It really wasn't about the libraries making partners or reaching out to folks. It was all for me. But as we got further and further into those dialogues, the library staff started inviting doctors, and they started inviting people from the health clinic, the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, from culture centers, because all of these people had a pulse on what it was that their community members wanted and needed. And they could give us that information a lot better than the library staff, who in some cases, again, especially in rural Colorado, they had swaths of the population they just weren't able to get access to. So on to our second bullet point then, these dialogues encourage libraries to reach out to new partners, consider how to better reach underserved audiences, and better meet their patrons where they are. So this is a good time to pause and say, I know you guys already talk to your patrons, and I'm not trying to imply that people don't. We've just found these focusing on potential partners in the community and other stakeholders, and having it be more free form, right? Not really having a set question or problem you're setting out to answer, at least at the start, allows issues to kind of surface that people weren't really talking about. Things like, sorry, I had a procedure today and my brain is a little foggy. Things like focus groups and things like that are absolutely great. And we've had a lot of libraries do focus groups prior to having their community dialogues or after, once a salient community issue has been identified. But these are really different. These are, again, very open. And you guys wouldn't be the facilitators, which I think is great. So when you invite people into these community dialogues, again, whichever version you want, if you're inviting Community leaders and movers and shakers, great, invite the mayor, invite the school board, invite people who really know what's going on in the community, but more important, can make a change, right? If there's something that you need help with, get people in the room who can help you make those waves and make that change. But I also wanted to point out that community leaders doesn't necessarily just mean like the mayor and elected officials. And poor Stephanie's heard this story like 30 times now. But my favorite community mover and shaker was one of our NASA at My Library libraries actually invited Joe, who runs the sandwich shop, because they were in a food desert, and literally everyone in that small community saw Joe at least once a day, sometimes twice or 3 times a day. So he knew all the gossip, he knew what everyone was doing and what help they might need, you know, what factory might have been shutting down, right? Like Joe knew everything. So even though he was just a sandwich guy, he was really helpful in this conversation. So that's how we started recommending these dialogues, is with those community leaders and stakeholders. Some of our libraries have chosen to invite community members, which is absolutely great. And I've been to a couple of those. I would say the caution with doing community members, I don't know if anyone in this small group has seen Parks and Recreation. Oh yeah, Luna, exactly. Going to the secretary at the school, they have all of the information. But if you guys have seen Parks and Recreation, there's this scene where Leslie Knope has this big open forum with all the community members, and she can't get a word in, and neither can anyone else, right? Because everyone's just kind of screaming and yelling and trying to get their point across. If you're a very good facilitator, or you have a good facilitator, or you trust your community members to take advantage of this opportunity, great, invite them in. If this is more of a new idea for you, I would definitely start at the stakeholder level or do smaller ones with community members invited. We've even had some folks who didn't want to do a sit down, do kind of like an open house at the library and have big sticky panels up at stations so that those community members could let their opinion be known, but not talk over other folks at the same time, which is, I think, really important to let everyone feel like their opinions are being heard. So why are we promoting this right now? So this is a framework, like I said, that we developed about 5 years ago, and it's constantly evolving. We really hope to be able to encourage more libraries and other informal venues to participate these and kind of contribute to the framework. So right now on our website, Stephanie, if you could throw up the community dialogue webpage link when you have a chance, we have a full like 20-page guide, which sounds long, but it's shorter than many of these things. You could just read the highlights and it's okay. As well as templates that you might want to share with people in your community. Like, Annie, you're asking me to invite the mayor. How the heck do I invite the mayor? I have a template letter for that. Wow, I use my hands a lot when I'm not in our webinar room. Sorry, guys, put them in my lap. So feel free to take a look at that and see, you know, if you don't want to do a community dialogue our way, but some of those resources are useful, go for it. I don't really care how people do it. I just care that they're making this effort to reach out into their community. So this is a chart with a lot of big words. So obviously we're talking about community dialogues here. Most of you are huge on community engagement, if it's not even in your title like it is in mine. And what we've heard a lot about in the community is the idea of learning ecosystems, right? How can libraries, schools, museums, parks and recreation departments, right? How do they all work together to make an impact, and sometimes, if they're lucky, a collective impact, the circle in the center, in their community? We certainly don't think that having a community dialogue means that you're having collective impact. But we think if it's a little harder to get into the ear, right, of those other community organizations, this is a really good way to start, kind of focusing the library as a place where people can come to be heard, where people are listening, and where you've got the ear of those other community partners as well. So I just wanted to throw up a quote here real quick from one of our librarians from our Project Build, that's an engineering program, what she had to say about dialogues. I'll go ahead and read it in case you guys can't read it. She said, "There's no doubt that the community dialogues are beneficial to all parties. I think this method should be employed more often when we're considering all kinds of services, initiatives, and programs for our community. The reason I really like to highlight Lisa saying this is she's very popular in the library community. And if any of you know her, she does things where she gets feedback from her patrons all the time, right? She is the poster child for talking to her community and hearing what they have to say. Even though that's a common thing for her, she still felt like this framework that we've developed with these dialogues was different enough to still be useful in her community. This picture on the right over here is a dialogue that I was actually able to attend. That's Lisa in that mirror in the back looking very excited, that we were able to attend a couple weeks ago. And what I loved about it is it really kind of encapsulates what we're talking about with these dialogues of being flexible and open. If you're inviting the mayor and the school board and a homeschool mom says, "Ooh, can I come, but I have to bring my kid?" I think the answer is yes, right? If she has the time and the effort to try to participate and make a difference in the community, the answer is always yes. So Lisa invited very important leaders and members of the community. This fellow talking right here runs an after-school program. The lady on the right is from a different branch of the Broward County library system, I believe. And then these two ladies in the front, the one with the little girl, they're homeschool parents who participate all the time in library programs. They volunteer at the library, they donate supplies to the library, and they really felt that in their spare time, which I think we all now know that homeschool parents don't really have spare time, so these ladies must be amazing. They thought in their spare time that they could contribute to this sort of project. So Lisa had this little girl's on the lap. There's two more kids right over in the corner playing with a bunch of Legos and Kiva planks that got put out. And I think that it sends a really nice message to the participants that you're willing to make concessions and make changes for people to participate. So I really like to highlight Lisa's dialogues because I think they're just the best. So probably the reason you guys are on this call, I told you if you wanted to get your very cool game, which is in production right now, that you had to do things. Again, kinda, you have to do things. One, you have to participate in a webinar. So check, you've got that. We're also going to ask whenever it is that you get to do your community dialogue and whatever it looks like, and we'll talk about that in a second, that you complete a very brief report. A link will be emailed to you and posted on the website. This next week-ish is from 2 weeks ago, and I still haven't done it, so no rush there. We'd also ask if you're able to distribute surveys to the folks who participated in your webinar. And again, we'll send you the link to that too. And we'd love to see pictures. If I could have pictures of your webinars and not just Lisa's, that would be fantastic. So let me just look real quick. Okay, perfect. So before we get to the discussion part of this webinar, I did want to say, obviously, with all that's going on right now, I am certainly not expecting anyone to do a community dialogue before Earth Day or even maybe by this summer, because we just don't know what's happening. You still get all the stuff that we said that we would send you. I'd still love for you to do the community dialogue, but it's kind of in your own time, right? If that's during summer reading, if that's in the fall, fantastic. The big push for me is I'm working on a research program that needs, honestly, some data. So if anyone can do it and do the reports, that'd be helpful to me, but let's make sure this is helpful to you too, and you don't rush it if you're not ready. I've talked to some libraries that participated in the earlier webinars, and they're going to do a virtual community dialogue, which is fantastic, and we've certainly never done those before. And I'm happy to help anyone who might need help doing that, but they're literally just gonna open up a Zoom room and have a couple prompts and ask people how the community could be supported by their library during this kind of shutdown, right? Some libraries are talking about how can they start summer reading early to support schools who are having a hard time. Yep, Luna, exactly. How can they support schools who are having a hard time getting kids to read, right? Like I look outside, there's a playground behind my house and kids have been playing all day, every day, which like just grosses me out because ew, you're touching things other people are and we're all gonna die. But right there, can we start the kind of fun summer reading early to get those kids back inside and doing just a small amount of work in between their playing. So that's something that I think would be really cool if someone wanted to try to do a virtual one, and certainly it would make my research more interesting to have different ideas there. So please, like I said, be crazy with it, do whatever works for you. It all works for us. So I wanted to ask you guys, a few questions. So number one, Why did you want to do a community dialogue? And if the answer is because we really wanted that cool game you made, Annie, that's a fine answer too, but maybe you have a better answer. And again, feel free to either unmute or type your answers in the chat box. Luna says, pandemic reading clubs, interesting concept. I started a Facebook group called Pandemic Fitness, and the idea is every hour a new person posts an exercise. So those of us who are sitting at our computers all day get up and like our muscles don't atrophy. So Luna says her speakers are taking the day off. Anyone else have any reasons I want to better serve my community? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that is really the answer. You know, when we were talking, so we can help our community, when we were talking to our program officer at NASA about these things, she's like, well, do librarians really want to have these conversations? Do they want to hear what people in the community have to say? And our whole table just burst out laughing, right? We thought we had like made it clear. I know, Luna, right? We thought we had made it clear in our proposal that librarians are really service-oriented and service-based, and they care so much about their community, and they're really the pulse of the community. If you want to see what matters to the community, go to the library, right? And our program officer still kind of had it in her head that, well, libraries are for books. So are they gonna ask their patrons what books they should buy? And we're like, oh dear God. So that, I think too, you know, just from the standpoint of the library community, there are so many people and people in power, like our program officer, who think like that. And I'm really hoping that my research project and the reporting out of all of this can open those people's eyes a little bit. You know, I write reports for this project. They can go to Congress. So not to put any pressure on anybody, but if you'd like to stop people from thinking libraries are just about books, which kills me, now's the time. Yeah, Luna says, in many places, the library is the center of the community. Like I've seen, and I'm sure some of you guys are doing it too. We have a lot of school districts, especially in rural Colorado, that the school district can't afford to be providing kids with meals. And the libraries have stepped up to do it. We've had libraries tell us that they're printing out some activities from our clearinghouse and putting them in the free lunches that the schools are sending out. Like, librarians and library staff are certainly not sitting any of this out. And I think this might be an opportunity really to show people how important libraries are. Nancy says they're doing lunch at the library. Exactly. So, oops, I keep pushing too many buttons. So next question is, who will you guys invite to your dialogue? So we'll give you a ringer first, since Stephanie hasn't talked much. Stephanie, if you were having a dialogue, who would you invite to your library?
So what I would think about is the movers and shakers in my community. You know, the mayor, county commissioners, school board, people like that, people who know other people, people who are influential in their community are the great people you want to have. Some of what Annie was saying too is, you know, a lot of times libraries are looking at engaging in an audience that may not come into the library. So finding out, okay, who's that person that the community relies on, whether it's a cultural center, whether it's a chamber of commerce person, whether it's a local church deacon or priest or something like that. You know, who is that person that can help you engage with that community? That's a great person to invite as well, because they will have input of, hey, you're doing this thinking you're helping them, and in fact you're not.
Yeah.
So you really want to try to look at the people who would know the most, who are engaged. And a lot, you may get, you know, the mayor may be very busy. You know, if you're part of a big urban center, you know, the mayor can't be at everything. So a great thing to do is, if you do get a no, ask that person, okay, well, who then should I invite? Who else should I go talk to? Even if you get a yes, you can be like, all right, awesome. Who else should I talk to? This will help kind of build that relationship dynamic in your community, because everybody knows everybody in some form. It's that kind of 6 degrees of separation type of deal.
Yeah, so Stephanie, I'm so glad you said this, and I wish I would have thought to say it on other community dialogue calls, but there's a research method called snowball sampling, And it's exactly what Stephanie just said, right? So you get one person to say yes, and then you ask them to give you one more name. And then that new person gives you one name. And by the time you get to the end, the people don't know the first person, but you've gotten a really nice spread. I know we're trying to stop spread right now. I just saw that GIF in my head, and that's not what we want. But you get a really nice subset of the community that way, and it's not a whole lot of effort on your part. I think this question, local community, yes, activists, I love it. I don't think anyone has said that before.
No, that one's new.
Yeah, this is a good time to bring up with this question. Don't just think about the people you already know. One thing that has been very successful for our NASA at My Library folks doing the dialogues is to look at their programs in the past that have failed, and figure out why they failed, and if it was, were they trying to reach a group that didn't come, and kind of work backwards from there. The best example I have, and this one just makes me both laugh, cringe, and smile every time, is this librarian down south, never eat soggy watermelon, southwest Colorado, right on the border with Stephanie. The state down there would be New Mexico? Yes, I was gonna get it right. He has a huge Spanish-speaking population and a huge Native American population, and that Native American population speaks Spanish before they speak English. So he set up a Spanish language children's book corner in the library, thinking, oh, great, I see them come in sometimes, but they kind of don't know what to do, and this will be perfect. They'll know this area is for them. But when he set it up, he wrote in big letters above it in English, Spanish language storybooks. And when we went for the community dialogues for Discover Health and did a focus group before the dialogue, talking to that community and asked them, why does no one use those books? Like, they're never checked out. They were checked out more before he put that corner up. And they said, oh, well, it was in English, so we thought it was for the gringos learning Spanish. We didn't think it was for us, right? There was nothing that said to that community, this display is for me. It wasn't in their language. There wasn't any sort of, sending messages out to the church about, look at these cool new things we did. And they just didn't know. And it was as simple as him changing that signage and sending a message out. I don't remember where he sent it to. And it picked up immediately. But that's something that had we not went and asked or had that conversation, he never would have figured out. So that's something to consider too. With these dialogues is invite people maybe you wouldn't have expected or that you haven't had a good time with in the past, because they won't hesitate to tell you why.
So Diane said Rotarians, absolutely. Rotarians are great. They're definitely involved in their community. A lot of times they're small business owners, so they will know what's going on. The other thing to look for is kind of along those same lines, is you can get VFW posts, you can get Kiwanis clubs, Masons, key clubs, kind of anything along those lines. Boy Scouts and both Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts have executives, so they have professional scouts that usually are in charge of a specific demographic community. So they might have like a few towns in the area, or they might be in your county. They're great people because they know a lot of people, and so they would be great to come as well. So like a district executive or whatever the Girl Scout equivalent is. Right. But yeah, you definitely just want to think of people who just think of the socialites. Who are the people that know everyone? Because you're going to get a lot of good information from that.
I like socialites. They're going to come with like a feather in their hair.
Okay, just because I grew up in New England.
All right. Yeah, that's a great list. And if you go to that community dialogue website, there's a PDF that has a list of literally every type of person that's been invited to past dialogue. So these have been conducted, I should have said this earlier, so far in about 150 libraries across the country. So we do have a lot of really great lessons learned from other folks. The poor Discover Health libraries who did it first with me, they were kind of on their own, but there's a lot of good stuff on that site now. So again, this might change a little bit due to the situation we're in right now, but one of our suggestions for topics you could discuss in the dialogue are what are the big environmental issues in your community. So maybe you guys put in the chat box what you think your big environmental issues are, but at the same time, if there's like a big question you'd want to ask about supporting your community during this kind of shutdown, go ahead and throw that in there too. We're really interested to start gathering those types of things to send out to the other folks who've signed up for the dialogues as well. Stephanie, what question would you ask your community about how we can support them? I'm just putting you on the spot.
Thanks. Are you talking environmental or like related to the coronavirus right now.
I think related to what if you were a librarian, what would you ask your community?
So actually something I've been seeing a lot on things like Nextdoor is who are those in the community that need extra help? So who are the people that are high risk that could use somebody going to the grocery store for them or something along those lines? It would be good to know if people could identify those people, or who are first responders. Like I know a lot of the people in my community are making masks, or they have masks and they're trying to find places to donate them. So kind of finding things around those questions. I know my grandparents just drove back from Arizona on Monday, and my grandmother is 85 with asthma and type 2 diabetes. Like she has like 3 strikes against her. So she basically said, I'm not leaving the house if I don't have to. So my mom and I are planning on doing the grocery shopping for them, so my grandmother doesn't potentially get infected. So what are the other things that could help? So that's something I would probably ask, is who needs the help in the community?
That's a good one. I spy on way too many libraries' Facebook pages, but I saw one library, oh gosh, I think it might have been in Illinois, right, saying, you know, our funding and our staffing has been cut right now, but we do have time to help. These are our 4 ideas. Vote on which idea is most important for the community, right? So one was like drop-off book service, help with census and taxes. Another one was just doing online programs, right? Like we've been talking about. I remember the 4th, but yeah, I think there's, you know, we don't expect libraries to be able to fix everything, but there are things that are definitely in you guys' wheelhouse that folks might really love to get some support on. If we are, yes, finding jobs. It's been so interesting hearing folks that were laid off from, for example, like fast food jobs, right? Saying
My
that
husband's been laid off.
What was that?
My husband has been laid off.
Stephanie's husband's been laid off because he interacted with people doing like physical fitness training stuff. And this isn't so much for Will. I don't want Will to have to go work in a grocery store, but like people who worked in fast food aren't realizing that the grocery stores are desperately hiring, right? Like it's almost like a matchmaker service. Like, did you know kind of situation. Luna says food, absolutely. Most children in my area are on the free food programs, but a staffer in the food program tested positive and the food bank has had to take over. That's absurd. But like, these are kind of the, it's why it's like so awkward for me to be like, can I do a program for you when people are facing these other big issues? But it's like, not every library can step in that situation. So what can everybody do with the resources that they have?
I do like Rael on the environmental side talking about conversion to solar power and electric car sources for powering and fueling. I actually like that as a conversation just because it's interesting. I live in a rural community that's heavily oil and gas, which is a big part of like northeastern Colorado. There's a lot of fracking. But we have a solar community. Our entire town is a solar community, and yet we're heavily influenced by oil and gas. So it's kind of like interesting that this happened, and I'm curious as to like how people got behind it. So I think that would be a great conversation, because you would think, oh, if I'm oil and gas, I don't want anything to do with solar because that's taking my jobs, or it could be any type of thought process. But instead, our community embraced it. So it's kind of like the opposite thinking. So I love that idea.
Mm-hmm.
Rosetta Stone is hiring. That's cool. I didn't know that.
I want to work there. Luna says learning at home isn't going to happen right now. Very few people have internet. And I think that's a really good point, because I saw Luna say that and I went, really? It's so community specific. Like, and I'm sure it's even different in my community from Stephanie's. Like Boulder Valley schools are very much expecting everyone to be online next week and learning. Thankfully, not as bad as other school districts, like only 3 hours a day. And they are handing out computers to folks who need it, but it sounds like we're going to be able to, in Boulder Valley, give our extra computers to other districts who need more help, right? Because so many people have computers at home. So those kids totally want, to hear story time from their library, but absolutely kids in a less resource town, that's not what they need.
And that's why
libraries, right? You guys know that, we don't.
Yeah, that's exactly my community.
Yeah.
So
Rael says they're doing USFDA lunches and breakfast for our community right now. That's awesome. And also they're working and trying to get library solar and electric stations in strategic places in our area. That's really cool. Yeah, and it sounds like Luna's community probably doesn't want to hear about solar and electric stations right now, but if your community does, that's great.
Yeah.
We're all in very different places. Oops. So I'll go ahead and move on to the next question. I think we kind of all get the idea on that one. The idea is just figure out what we can do. So this is kind of separate from the coronavirus conversation. So this is more just in general. So are there any barriers in your library preventing folks from participating in these conversations? And I think the example I provided before about the librarian writing everything in English and not realizing that's problematic is a really good example here. We've also heard, again, most of my examples are Colorado specific because it's the community I know, but we have a lot of Mexican immigrants here, and in Mexico and in many Latin American countries, libraries are meant for the academic elite, right? So you have to pay to use them to get in. It's more like a museum with a membership. And they're kind of this like shiny beacon on the hill that normal people aren't allowed to go to. And folks who are recent immigrants and even who've been here for a while did not know they were allowed to be in the libraries in these towns that we were doing these community dialogues in. And again, it was as simple as going to the church or the community center and posting flyers and simply explaining it to people. Like one of the flyers literally said, "Libraries in America aren't like libraries in Mexico. Everyone is welcome." Like it was blunt and to the point, and people started showing up. Rail said they're doing a virtual run club, exercise at home, but as a collective. That's fantastic. So does anyone else have any particular populations in your community that you feel like have been hard for you to reach, or that you specifically want to make sure that you invite into these sort of conversations about community planning? Community planning made it sound way more formal than I meant it to. That's not what I meant. Yeah, Luna says some groups don't think the library has anything to offer them. For example, the deaf community. Luna, I'm sure you have heard about the Talking Book Library, which is for people who are hard of sight. I don't know if there's similar things for the deaf community. I have no idea. That's a really good example. Yeah, and it's interesting. I'm just gonna like gossip now. We were having a conversation about our NASA at My Library program and DEIA things, right? Diversity, equity, inclusion, and access. And everyone really wanted to focus on racial diversity, which I think is fantastic, but not to the exclusion of other things, right? So the deaf community, the blind community, LGBTQ folks, people with disabilities. These are all populations that we should be looking to see if there are barriers, not just to physically get to the library, but to participate in certain types of programs, right? We've seen a lot in our Colorado libraries that certain folks don't feel like they're welcome to participate in things like story time because a reservation is required. And their work schedules are so crazy, right, that they can't make a reservation because they're afraid that they won't make it, and no one would be upset, right, if they didn't make it and that spot got wasted. But in their head, they're taking a resource that could belong to somebody else, so they just never participate. So a lot of our libraries have gotten rid of reservation systems, which I know in big libraries is not a possibility. We've also seen folks, undocumented workers and their families be afraid to go to the library because you have to have a library card to use the internet at certain libraries, and you have to have a physical mailing address to get a library card. Well, they're not going to do that because libraries are government entities and they don't want government entities having their mailing address. So lots of libraries have changed it to, oh, well, you can provide your church or your community center or something else as your address. Because really, you guys aren't going to go track down people if they haven't turned in a book, right? Like there's reasons that folks need those addresses, but it can slide for certain people. Any other, whoopsie doodle, yes, I just did whoopsie doodle. Any other examples? I've talked a lot. Rael says we have a program in a holding pattern that is on hold to the virus, but it's connecting the local youth club with animal shelter to have reading buddies. Oh my God, I love it. When you get to do it again, send me pictures. We'll do a blog post. That's my favorite. Yeah, we've had some of our, I'm going to say snooty neighborhood libraries here have people like bring in their service dogs to be read to, but I just love the idea of it being the shelter animals that could really use the attention too. That's fantastic. Yes, I just called Louisville snooty. Don't tell them.
I mean, they are, but.
Thanks, Luna. All right, if anyone can think of any other groups they might particularly want to reach out to, go ahead and throw them there in the chat. I did want to let you guys know we're going to kind of combine all of the chat responses from the 5 different webinars we're doing to have kind of an FAQ on the website. So we're not going to like put your name by stuff, but we are going to steal your answers. So thank you. Nancy says, I partner with the adult school to have ESL and U.S. citizenship. Wow, can't say that word. You know,
citizenship.
Citizenship. That's the word. That's really cool. And Nancy, I'm sorry. I know where you're at, but can you remind me where you're at? Because my mind just blanked. Families with autistic children. Absolutely. Yeah, I really love the sensory-friendly story times. Those are always, my kids like them, and they aren't autistic, right? Those are just a nice service to provide regardless. So I'm going to go ahead and move on to our next slide. So thank you, Riverside. Got it. Sorry, Nancy, my brain literally blanked. So I just wanted to show you a quick screenshot of that community dialogue website and some of the resources on there. So again, if you guys go to that website, there's templates to invite people to dialogues. And again, if you're doing a Zoom dialogue, which I think sounds pretty cool right now, you can still use those templates. And I guarantee, especially when we're talking government agencies and stuff, I almost think people are more likely to come to these virtual ones because they're looking for ways to reach out and interact with their community. And they know you guys have the community already. So we'll take that as a plus. There's also the community dialogue guide. Any pictures that you see on this website, you are free to use in your publicity. So if people are asking, what does a community dialogue look like? We've got plenty of pictures that you can use to show them. So anything on that site, absolutely free to use. You don't need to ask permission. That's true anywhere on our website, but I especially want to make it clear here since there's pictures of random people. I also wanted to point out for people who might be a little hesitant to do a dialogue in person once this all comes down, or even online, you know, folks who don't want to be a facilitator and they don't want to sit there and talk. Really good ways to do it when you're in person is to set up a lot of stations with activities from our clearinghouse. And while the kids are doing the fun hands-on activity, maybe having a library staff member there facilitating, the adults can be using those big sticky notes, right, to answer some questions, or you guys can have a volunteer there asking questions. It doesn't have to be a big formal sit-down event. And I think you could do this too, kind of in multi-stage, right? If you guys are doing online programs for kids trapped inside during all of this, you know, end it with a question about programming or about the community needs for the parents, and then kind of conglomerate, that's totally not a word, all of those responses, and that's your dialogue, right? We want to encourage you to be as imaginative with this as you can and as you're able. And again, if you just don't have the bandwidth to think about it right now, please don't. You can think about it in June. I don't know when we're all going to open again, but our schools are all, and my school are all canceled until next year. So next school year. So hopefully the libraries get to open before that. But yeah, whatever works for you guys, please don't feel like there's any pressure to do any of this. Oh, and sorry, I had that covered up. And if you do go use a cool activity from our clearinghouse, make sure to leave a review telling people not just, yes, we liked it, Annie, but if there's something you changed about it. One of the things we really like is we do have a section saying how other librarians have modified the activity for their use. So it'd be great if you guys could provide some of that feedback. So that is the end of my slideshow. I saw a question just pop up. Luna says, maybe do a clearinghouse activity that relates to the subject of the dialogue as an icebreaker. Absolutely. Especially if you're doing environmental kind of based ones. There's a lot of really good earth science activities in the clearinghouse. I will say though, Stephanie, Paul is trying to call me in the middle of a webinar.
Of course he is.
I will say, so this very first activity here on this clearinghouse picture, you see the sorting game. This is the simplest activity, and I think Nancy and Luna probably both already know it. You just print out these cards and you ask the participants to sort them in any way that they may like. And there's not just one right answer, right? It's not like they're all planets and they can easily say, oh, let's put them in order. And people do. They sort them by order, by weight, by how much we've learned about them. I had librarians one time sort them by Dewey Decimal Number, and that about killed me. But it's a really good icebreaker activity because it gets people up and moving and talking and laughing, and then they can answer the harder questions. So yeah, icebreakers, as much as I hate them being done to me, very useful for this kind of discussion. Thank you, Luna, for pointing that out. So we ended kind of early here, but I don't think anyone is going to complain about that. Easier when we have a smaller group for sure. Oh, thank you, Diane. Very good question. So the Globe Observer Tree Challenge is currently on hold. The reason for that is NASA has put out a directive to anyone funded by NASA saying that we are not allowed to encourage folks to go outside. This is all my personal opinion and not the opinion of NASA. That is in direct contrast to the CDC recommendations that say, for the love of God, get outside, just stay away from each other. So the tree challenge is officially on hold, but the tree app is still available. So people can still do the measurements, both with the tree app and the cloud challenge. You can still do the measurements and they'll still go to scientists. It's just not officially part of that challenge. So I'm told that Globe has a call with NASA tomorrow to get clarification on this issue. So it's entirely possible the challenge itself could resume any day now. But the app itself still works and the data still goes to the scientists. So I would not let the lack of a challenge stop folks from doing that if you're comfortable doing it. Again, if you know most of your patrons have a backyard, they can go in their backyard and measure a tree, right? That's, people need to go outside. You know, if you're a urban library and everyone's on top of each other, maybe that's not the best recommendation. So it's up to you guys, but do know the apps still completely work and the data is still being used. They just can't promote it in the same way right now. Great, thank you. I was going to mention that and I totally forgot. All right, so if there aren't any other questions, Stephanie and I will stay on just for a minute in case anyone, yes, absolutely. I would encourage patrons to download those apps. There's also, oh, interesting. Luna says many local governments have issued stay indoors orders. Though us at least, and the other ones I've heard have definitely issued stay at home orders, but that exclude going outside for exercise. But you're absolutely right. I don't know the whole country and I'm sure there are people. So again, this is a situation of know the rules in your county, know your citizens and know what's safe for them. But yes, absolutely, download those apps. They still work, and some of them don't necessarily require going outside, like the cloud app. You can certainly do it through a window. That's not a problem at all. So yeah, take a look at them and see which ones you might be comfortable with. And if you're not comfortable with any of them, that's fine too. Hope things won't be this way forever.
Yeah, and look at it as something to be excited for the future, for when we all can go outside again.
Mm-hmm. How do you access all of these apps? Stephanie,
I think they're on the clearinghouse, but I will put the link in the bank. Give me 1 second.
I bet I'll beat you.
No, you won't. Ha!
Oh, you already get it?
I have a link bank open.
Well, I didn't know. Well, I'm going to type it too. Oh, mine's specifically about the app.
Whatever.
So yes, go there to get the app. And Stephanie's link, though, is probably better to read more about their official statements as they put them out about what they're encouraging people to do. Luna,
we're learning what it will be like to be in a spaceship heading for Mars. Exactly. Social isolation.
We're practicing being astronauts.
Actually, there has been a lot of things coming out, like advice from astronauts who've been at the space station for a year or more, that they're saying how do you deal with having to be in a tight quarter.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I think Mark Kelly came out with something, and I can't remember his name. Oh, I see his face. He has the amazing mustache. He's said some stuff too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, all right, guys, thank you so much for joining us. I hope your library is taking care of you. And again, if there's anything we can do to help, even beyond the stuff we talked about today, we're here. Pretty much Stephanie and I's job right now is to support librarians and library staff however we can. We're not doing much of anything else. So please do reach out if you need anything. Thank you.
Diane wants to know if they will get a transcript.
Oh, yes, we can send a transcript. Oh, thanks, Diane. I like you.